Well, howdy, 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 everyone. Welcome to Livestream. This is Pete Bickford. I am the creator of ComicBase, and I'm your host for this wonderful hour of magic that we have going on here. Welcome, everyone. Let me just get a few things set up before we get going, and we will get this show rolling. Just moving things around on the different monitors. You will have my full attention. Just one second. All right. Thanks, everyone. Okay. I want to focus this one on your own questions, so please post them in the chat if you have anything you'd like me to answer, and I will hit as many of them as I possibly can during the course of the show. And I'm going to try to keep this one short, and actually I think this actually may be a short show because I got stuff to do, and I'll tell you more about that stuff later on. But let's get down to announcements to start with. First of all, this week in ComicBase, things that are new. We are up to build 1502. So, and let me back this up a little bit. So if you guys say, wait a minute, I checked for updates. It says I have the latest version. How come you're keeping on telling me about new things? Because we are in kind of a continuous release cycle. So there's only certain releases that are like required releases for everybody. They show up if you say check for updates. Those are the ones that end in big round numbers, or at least numbers at the third position. So the current version of ComicBase is ComicBase 2021. And its version number is 21.0.1 point something or other. Now, the 0.0.0.1, those ones trigger a release that you get when you say check for updates. Those are the releases. They come about once a quarter. We really want everyone to be on the same page for, and we'll try to make sure that you are all getting those ones. In between that, every single time we find something we want to do with the program that makes it better, or that we fix a little bug or just a little thing, we'll put out an interim release. That's the number after the 0.0.1. And currently we're at build 1502. And so if you want to see what we're doing with all those ones, you got two ways to do it. One is if you go to ComicBase's preferences and you say, along with the check for updates, there's a option there to say, do you want to include the, let me get the actual name of it. Do you want to, it's the second item down. Let me switch over to the other screen here. Do you want to, let me pull it over there. Do you want to check for interim updates? That's this checkbox right there. If you got that checked and you check for updates, then you'll see every single little thing that we do that makes the program better. Now, this may be exhausting, in which case, feel free to ignore it until we say, look, dude, there's an update you have to update in order to get the next content update, at which point you can definitely pay attention to those. But if you do like seeing just everything that's new, that is what you want to do. And then also, if you go to the ComicBase homepage, and let me do that right now. Let's see here. Comicbase.com, and I'll pull that over to the other screen. Get the YouTube stuff off the screen. All right, here we go. So at the top of the ComicBase homepage, over here, you see the latest official build, 21.0.1, and the latest interim build, 1502. And if you click on that, you'll see all the little futsy things that we've done since the last official build. And as you can see, this list will get longer and longer and longer. Then the next quarter will roll around, or the next really big thing that we feel is so important that we must make you update. At which point, this one will become a short list, and the official list of changes will become, everything new. But anyway, let me tell you what we've been doing lately, because it's kind of interesting. So since last couple weeks, we've put out a couple interesting changes to the program. One of them is that we've added it back in foreign currency conversion for a database that starts out in one currency, and then you want to change to a different database. So this one came up as a result of one of our Canadian customers called up and said, hey, I had the database in US dollars, but now my insurance agent wants me to give them a list, but they want the list in Canadian dollars. And it's like, oh, okay, no problem. And then we realized, oh, wait a minute, that's one of those very, very, very few features that it seemed like no one was using, so we dropped it from ComicBase 2020 because we said, well, let's wait until someone asks for it before we bother putting it back in. Well, it just got asked for, so it just got put back in. So if you are running in a foreign land, which is to say a land outside the United States, and your currency settings in Windows are different than the currency settings of your database, then you will, the very first time you run ComicBase 1502 or later, it'll say, hey, let's say you're in Australia. It says, hey, look, you're in Australia, but the currency settings in the database are US dollars, USD. Did you want to convert them to Australian dollars, AUD? At which point, if you say yes, it'll give you the options to, well, did you want to convert your cost, your selling prices, all of the above, etc., or did you just want to say, no, it's good. I've been tracking it in Australian dollars the whole time. Just mark it as having been in Australian dollars. That's another option you've got. But whatever you choose, it will go ahead and download the current exchange rate for between the U.S. dollar and say the Australian dollars, or the Swiss franc, or whatever your currency unit in your local area is, and it will do the necessary conversions. It'll round things to the next sensible increments and so forth. Then it'll convert all the pricing and costs or whatever else you choose in your database to that currency. So this is of interest, obviously, to a lot of folks outside the U.S. We're kind of shocked that once we dropped the feature to convert between those two, so few folks have asked us for it, but we finally got, so it's finally back in. So that's the thing. If you ever decide, if you were initially asked whether or not you want to convert, and you said, nah, not right now, and you want to change your mind later on, another thing you can do is if you go back to the File menu, go to Collection Statistics, and let me pull that one onto the right screen. If you look over here on the far right, there's a little icon, which is your database info. This gives you a lot of interesting stuff about your database. It'll tell you, among other things, how many books you've got, how many, comics, etc. But down here by the currency, if you've got a currency, so right now my database is in U.S. dollars, and I live in Franklin, Tennessee, where, as it turns out, U.S. dollars is what we use for trading for things. But if you were living someplace where U.S. dollar is not what you use locally, or for that matter, you had it in Swiss francs and then you move to some country where now it's the euro you want to use, it'll tell you, hey, there's a mismatch there. Did you want to convert it? And it'll give you an option to click there to convert. So once again, the way to get there, if you ever change your mind later on and want to convert your currencies, is go to the File menu, go to Collection Statistics. I can totally say that. It's a real thing. Click the database info, and then finally, over here you'll see that the currency will be lit up in red along with an option which says click here to convert, and then it'll give the option to do that. All right, so that's kind of a big deal to smallish number of users, but if you are one of those folks, ideally it's hopefully a big deal to you. Other things we've done. This one affects everyone for a small number of titles, is we finally made all the web calls in ComicBase use a standard called UTF-8. You say, what the Bickford, what the heck are you talking about? What UTF-8 is UTF-8 is sort of a short version of Unicode. Unicode is a universal way of representing characters. Think about all the different things you could ever type on a keyboard. And in America, we traditionally have used a thing called Windows 1252 is the name for the character encoding. That it's basically everything you could ever type on a Windows keyboard. Natively in America, it has all the upper and lowercase characters, all the all the punctuation marks, all the shift punctuation marks, and even all the funny characters like M hyphens and N hyphens and cedillas and things like that. Well, unfortunately, in other parts of the world, they got even more characters than you can do using that kind of stuff. And when you get to places which use script systems like Hebrew systems or Arabic or Japanese, they use so very many characters you could never hope to type them all on a standard keyboard, and so they're required to use a different kind of encoding to transmit text, and it's called Unicode. Anyway, when the web came out, they very wisely decided, just web-wise, that they were going to use Unicode as the basic standard of transmission for characters on the web. Unfortunately, ComicBase has been out for 8 years or so before the web became popular, and we were very married to this Windows 1252 thing, which carried forward all the way until now, because honestly, for all the comic books that were ever published in America, Europe, etc., Windows 1252 worked perfectly well. But we do want to branch out into other countries as we went on, and we also want to play nicer with the web in general. So we have made the decision going forward to make Atomic Avenue and ComicBase speak Unicode essentially. Now, where this came up, where this became a sore point for everybody using ComicBase is, and let me show it over here, is, let's say you have a comic book like Star Wars Agent of Empire, the Iron Eclipse. Now, that long line between Agents of the Empire and Iron Eclipse is called an M hyphen. The idea is a hyphen that's about as wide as the letter M. A shorter one is called the N hyphen. Use that to denote numeric ranges if you guys really love your typography. Well, this is one of those characters that translates differently between standard ASCII and Unicode. And one of the problems we'd have is, up until now, we had to make sure that both ComicBase and Atomic Avenue were both on the same encoding system, which is to say Windows 1252, because otherwise when we would go over here and say search for Star Wars Age of the Empire, it would say, hey, I can't find this title, it's got a lot of funny characters in it. And what that really was it was a mismatch between the encoding standards that the two wanted to use. We've made the decision now that ComicBase 2017, which is the last ComicBase to really be married to Windows 1252 at a core level for its what it passes around in terms of characters. We decided, look, it's the ComicBase 2017 and earlier user base is diminishing by the minute. The vast majority of our users are now on Unicode, so let's fix this little issue now. And we coordinated with ComicBase.com and AtomicAvenue.com, so that now everyone's expecting Unicode, and a Unicode you shall get. So now when you go and you right-click on one of these funny titles like Star Wars Age of the Empire, Iron Eclipse, and you right-click and say Find Atomic Avenue, instead of getting a thing saying, hey, I don't know where Star Wars Age of the Empire, curvy left pound, Euro symbol, whatever Iron Eclipse is, instead it just goes straight to the title, and everything's good. And that also means that some of these other things like, let's make this a little bigger and include the issue graph. If I now click on titles that involve foreign characters, or they're called high order ASCII characters, like the M hyphen or cedillas, or that what was it? It was called the OAN, or the circle I, or whatever it was called, or I above or something. I'm gonna have to look back at the chat from last time. It will the strange Norwegian characters we were talking about last time out. All those will now work when you go to link up to Atomic Avenue. So anyway, that's something that's finally happened. It's great for everyone using the current versions of ComicBase. We're sad for everyone who's using older versions of ComicBase, because there wasn't really a win on this one, because we basically had to say, look for this thing, and we had to encode it using one standard or the other. And so if it doesn't find, if you're using a very old version of ComicBase, older than about 2 years ago, and you try to now search for some of these high-end titles, you're going to get the problem that all the new guys used to have, because it'll say, hey, I don't know what this title is, and it'll make you search for it manually. Anyway, so all the new guys, this is your bonus for upgrading. Now everything works well. All the old guys, it's time to upgrade. So please do, and then everything should work good for you. So that's a big one. Other things that have gone on this of note in ComicBase this time out, free users. It turns out we're having a trouble posting to Atomic Avenue. We've resolved that issue for them. And I think that's the big stuff. So let me go to the chat, see how we're doing on this one here. And by the way, thank you everyone for showing up for this thing. I know it's been a slow news day, nothing else is happening, but we appreciate you showing up. Hail, I'm gonna start getting into this sort of chat shorthand for everyone, just say hail. Let me go and pull this up in my other window that lets me put these things forward in a way that's a little bit less distracting, because I'm not seeing a little picture of myself. Okay, Greg says hi from South Jersey, 37, mostly sunny, sweet fireplace weather, that indeed. It is finally up into the 50s out here in Franklin, Tennessee. I could not be happier. Well, I could be happier if we were even 10 degrees warmer, but it's we've almost had the end of our winter out here in the south, so thank God for that. It was a terrible month, and I don't want to do it again. Vancouver, Washington, on the other hand, 40 degrees overcast, sweet. Are we on there? Yes, we're on the air. Okay, let's see. Interesting. And yes, I did know the mic was hot around 3 minutes before airtime. That was all just for the folks here who were sitting there going, how much barking dog and comic shuffling noise can Pete make while the intro music was on? All right, let's see here. Okay, so Compliment asks, ComicBase DVD, I have Do you find having ComicBase on your own servers a lot cheaper than AWS? My experience is the storage is very expensive on AWS. Hell yes. So the short version of the story is when we first moved out from San Jose to, and I was going to move my family to Tennessee, is we, prior to that, had our own server rack that we hosted all of the ComicBase email and servers and DNS and the whole thing. It was a whole rack of servers that that hosted the whole business. Over a number of months before we made the move, this is now about 5 years ago, we made the decision to migrate all that stuff up to Amazon Web Services cloud service, and it was invaluable. Yeah, I mean, it would be very, very hard to take a month-long road trip and travel across the country and relocate and move into everything else. We'd have brought down the business had I not done something like this beforehand, because basically we were going to lose our server rack. The second we moved out of that office, we literally we shut down the power, and the first thing I did is I ran over to another computer and I said, "Is the business still running?" And we were very relieved after we did that it was, because we were now hosted with Amazon's cloud. That said, as great as the services Amazon Web Services run, man, oh man, oh man, is there a check that came with that. And it was, as I often say, it was the second biggest check I would write every month after payroll for what we did on that one. And it really became a problem when we started expanding what we were doing in terms of storage and bandwidth. So all that, we would always tell folks, hey guys, you get 2 gigs of free backup space on our cloud in order to store your backups with. And some people would, abuse that a bit, and and we also just got a lot of users. And so just, we would pay essentially rental on Amazon's disks for all that storage every month. We would pay rental, we'd pay storage for the transmission costs for the bandwidth to get content up and down from the cloud. It really was really quite the big expense. So a little over a year ago, we made a lot of effort where we set up a new rack over out here in Franklin, and new servers, new everything, and then we went through all the process of moving everything back down to our own servers. And so we've been doing that for a bit over a year now, and I like it a lot, because not only is it faster, because we can afford to throw more hardware at our various problems. So for instance, all of your servers are now hosted off of SSDs, and we've got 32 gigs of RAM stuffed in everything, and these are some pretty buff configurations. And if anything ever starts getting slow, you're like, okay, let's just throw more money at it and get faster stuff on the back end. So that's really easiest for us to do, because even if you sit there and say, look, I want to buy a 2 terabyte SSD, man, that's $400. For a really good one, it's like, well, it's $400. It's not $400 every month. So it's an easy choice for us to make on that level. Now, we do have to take on a lot more responsibility for a lot of the kind of data center activities that we have to talk about, and I'll talk about some of them. One of them is backup, that we didn't have to worry about quite as much with Amazon Web Services hosting all our stuff. But overall, it's been a real relief to be off of their system. As much as I'm appreciative for the time we were on their system, it's been a relief to be off. So anyway, that's that. And as a bonus, also, I guess they can't shut us down if they don't like something we're doing. So all right, let's see. Also asked, what kind of bandwidth is you using? You're going over 1 gig. Oh yeah, we were going well over a gigabyte. We started over a terabyte. In terms of total bandwidth. Now, he says, in some areas, business for fiber is now up to 1 gig, and the link to multiple lines, you can get more I/O. So we have, so in terms of total bandwidth, we transmit terabytes every month. Now, in terms of bandwidth per second, we don't, right now I believe we're at something like 40 gig. I'm sorry, not 40 gig, 40 megabyte per second up. It's advertised a little higher than that, but the effective bandwidth tends to be around 40, and that's all managed by different load balancers and firewalls and things like that. So there's a lot of pieces in the equation which, which control how much you're effectively getting. So that's been a little bit of a sore spot for us. One of the big areas where that's been a problem for us is when we try to serve up very large disk images, like the Blu-ray disk images when you're downloading things. We've had to move those entirely off-site, so they're hosted off of a number of different hosting systems, the primary one being MediaFire. So we pay them for just to get that bandwidth just out of our picture. We want to devote our bandwidth to the hot traffic. Hot traffic for us is things like email, downloading content updates, things like that. Just the big, bulky, slow ones, like downloading Blu-ray disc images, we want to make sure that that stuff isn't loaded on our servers as much as possible. Unfortunately, at the moment, I can't get what's called symmetrical 1 gig. Now, what a lot of you guys, have probably seen with your own home hosting situations is that it's much cheaper to get bandwidth coming down to you. Like, say you're streaming down a Netflix movie, you can get 1 gigabyte down relatively cheaply in most places, but to put 1 gigabyte up that's usually quite a bit more of a trick. There's a couple blessed places that have, like, say, fiber connections where I've heard about people who have symmetrical 1 gig. So in other words, they get 1 gig down and 1 gig up in terms of the bandwidth, which is fantastic. I'm dying of jealousy, like I'm dying of people who own, Ferraris. But unfortunately, that is just not something that you can't buy for any amount of money where I'm at in the country. Now, that said, had I moved our server location 20 miles north, it would suddenly become a no big deal thing to buy. And that may be something that we look in doing in the future. I am actually looking at different real estate options for other issues, and that might be something that we do in the future, just to, because I'm never going to get sick of having faster bandwidth available to me. But at the moment, that we got to make the best use of the bandwidth we've got. So that's how we've divvied that up. Okay, Oro says, is there a way to tell the program to remember and restore the window size when CB is restarted? Always seems to default to almost full screen, but not maximized. It does, but be careful. So the main window is the window that's always got to show, right? As soon as the main window doesn't show, we get tech support calls. Usually if the main window isn't showing for you, it means that despite everything we're trying to do, you somehow managed to place it off screen. If that ever happens to you, I'll show you the trick to doing that. What you got to do, let's switch over to here. For any Windows program, if for some reason you're just not seeing the main window on it, all you got to do, and so here's Slack right now. This is my Slack channel. You'll notice when I move the mouse over any of these icons, it'll display a little window which shows, where that window would be if it were really there. So typically what you would want to do is you'd want to right-click over that area. Right-click. Sorry, the problem I've got here is that it's actually, this one's actually open. But if you right-click on the little thumbnail on that one, and then choose the little menu will pop up that says Move. If you do that, then you can arrow and choose to move the window back on screen. So anyway, if that ever happens to you, that's a good thing to do. Now, in terms of the window size, the main window tries very hard to remember itself, but on the other hand, if it ever sees anything as the slightest bit hinky, it will immediately revert to its full-size default, because it's so problematic if the main window doesn't show. We don't suffer a lot of shenanigans with it not being where it was. So, so for instance, if I were to take the main window, and if it's not in maximized size, so if you look at the upper right-hand corner there, if that's maximized, forget about it. It's going to open up maximized where it was last time. It has to be in not maximized size. All 4 of its corners have to not be touching the edges of the screen. So if you have it, shrunk in somewhat on all 4 sides, and that includes the taskbar at the bottom. If that's the case, and also as long as your screen resolution never changes, then it will happily open exactly in those positions next time out. So if I exit the program and launch it again, it'll open up exactly the way I left it here. On the other hand, if any of those things is not true, if it's touching one of the edges, if my screen size changes, if anything like that happens, it's going to revert to going back to its default, which is to say it almost opens full screen and so forth like that. Sorry, this is just one of those things where, like, I totally get wanting to have it stay exactly where you want, but we're also balancing that against every single time the main window doesn't appear for any reason, even if it, like, somebody just dragged it partially off screen, that's a tech call for us. If this is where you left your main window and you're just looking over here for the whole thing and you don't happen to notice it's halfway over there, that's a tech call, and we can't take the tech call, so we'll bounce it to full screen if we ever see anything that looks hinky. All Let's see here. Hi from Olympia. Let's see. Aaron says, when the update's installed, it shows the progress bar dialog box when it stays in front of all windows cannot be put in the back or done in the background. I'm not sure which progress bar you're thinking of. The main progress bar in ComicBase, the one you see when it's doing anything, anything a little bit involved. Like let's say I'm going to let me go and say I'm going to print something, you know, a little bit involved, like a collection report for my collection, right? If I say print this for all titles I own. So if I do a preview of this, all right, it's going to bring up a progress bar. Now, that progress bar is going to want to stay in front of all other windows you've got there, mostly because if I ever let that, you know, go to the back, like so if I go to do other things and this gets submarined behind it, what happens is the program acts strangely, you know, if it's busy doing stuff, and you might not know what's going on with the whole thing, and it causes trouble. Once again, if it's the sort of thing that's going to generate tech support calls for us, it's the sort of thing that we're going to try to prevent from happening. So in general, you can even while that was up, you could go and choose different menu items and do other things, but that progress bar is going to want to stay in front of the other menu, other windows while it's open. And like I say, it's just an interface thing, just to make it so that other people, you know, people don't get confused about, well, why is my computer acting busy, or why is like if it was doing something like busy, like say optimizing your database or doing things that would lock your database, you can still get away with doing certain other actions in ComicBase, but if you do enough of them, you'll often run into a little bit of a conflict. At which point it's good to know, oh, well, the reason I ran into a conflict because it was busy doing that other thing. Whereas if that other thing is hidden behind the main window, that's going to be a problem for the user. All right, let's see here. Compliments, it took months to move things off of AWS. Yeah, no, it took months because we had to retool all of our all of our systems just to be self-hosting. Our backend architecture is largely based off of SQL Server for the database, and then we have about a dozen support programs that do things like, you know, helping post the content updates, processing online reports. You know, we have our whole email situation. You have, when you save a backup to the web and so forth, it's going after the thing. Every single one of those programs had to be rewritten to cope with the new servers, you know, where different file locations were placed. They all had to be individually tested. You know, and so forth. And you always have to, when you're dealing with a live system like this, you always have to make it so that no part of that system can be down for more than a couple of minutes. Because during those couple of minutes, you're going to have a very bad time, because all your tech support lines will be filling up with people getting angry at you. And so we would just do one thing at a time, all right, move this one little part down, move that other little part down. And then there came the time, very nervous time, where we had to move the main production database to be running off of the main R servers, and that was separate from is the website that uses that main production database. Where's that one running? And so you have to do all these things bit by bit, test them in between, and have it never be down for more than a couple minutes, and keep all the things in sync. Like, so for instance, whenever you move your main production database from one place to another, any records that were written to the database in the other place would be out of sync. So if anyone sold something on Atomic Avenue or ComicBase, and you were pointing to the wrong database location, suddenly that's a hand reconciliation job, and that's a freaking nightmare. So yeah, it's a very methodical, they call it an ops procedure to get things moved from one place to another. It's hard to get it up, and it's hard to get it down. And even that, and then I will also say there were a couple places where it took a good 3 days of solid data transfer to do things like moving everyone's backups from all the backups that all of our users had for all their databases, from all their going back for years, to move those down to our local servers. That was probably 3 solid days of nothing but data transfer to make that happen, and then we had to make sure that got synced up. So yeah, it was a production, but that said, it's a large check I don't write anymore, so that's a good thing. All right. John asks, how often are the photo files on the media file are updated? Great news. I just updated well, I haven't updated them on MediaFire yet, but I just updated them on the disks to this afternoon. We are now, about once a quarter, we do updates to the base archive and Blu-ray distribution discs, with everything. It is, if you guys have heard the podcast before, you know that also takes a couple, 3 days of doing nothing but compression, and that's if we get it right the first time. We actually got this one right the first time, so it only took 2 days of solid compression to compress the 684,240 picture files, which are part of the Blu-ray and archive editions. To get them into the different formats that we need for the different offerings for the 4K archive and for the the regular archive, and then the #1 issues for all the titles go on to the Pro and the Express and so forth. Those all got done, so if you were to buy a disc from us right now, you'd be getting the new ones. About a day from now, those will be done transferring up to MediaFire, and if you were to download the disc images, then you would have all the brand new ones. So, and we'll put out a note on the website when that transfer is done. That's something that we finished the disc builds before showtime by a couple hours, but we didn't finish the, we haven't managed to stage them to the distro servers up on MediaFire yet, so that's a thing. All right, let's see here. No edged before close. I think I understand what this is. Okay. Andre says, tried linking a path to a digital comic. My server doesn't work. I want it to work. I want it to copy double time. All right. So I believe if it's the one, if it's the issue you're referring to, this is something that got fixed somewhat recently. I'm going to say in the last week or two. And I seem to believe I believe you're the person who gave me the exact issue that was in effect here. So what we're talking about here is you've got a location of all your pictures down here on the main screen, and that's your pictures folder. Now, next to that is a place where you could put media files. So if I had a media file, like say I had the digital comic for Star Wars issue #1, I could call it 1.cbr. CBR is a comic book archive. I could drag that onto here, and then I'd see a little icon appear down there. I could click it, and it would appear. And a while back, what we had done is we had gone, and if you go under File Tools, and you go Manage Pictures and Movies, and I'm having to drag all this stuff over to the main window, of course, you'll see that we have 2 different locations now. We added a second one here, which is what's the location for your media. Now, that worked out pretty good, except for the exact situation that, Andre, I believe you had, which is to say, it didn't work out right if the location for your media files was the base level of your hard drive, which is to say, I want to say you had like a G drive or an I drive or something like that, but it was literally at I://. And what was happening is we were just not treating the path right. We weren't expecting the backslash to be there, and when it does, we're internally adding a second slash to it. So that's fixed. What you need to do though is you probably need to go first of all, make sure you're running build 1502, and go ahead and reselect your pictures folder and reselect your media folder, and after that it should work for you. Now that said, it's generally considered poor security to store data directly at the top level of a hard drive. Windows will actually bar you from doing that on the top level of your C drive, but it's a bad idea to do it at the top level of any drive, just because what it comes down to is the way your permissions work in Windows is if you say you've got such and such a user has permission to see things on the top level of that drive, it means that they have the same permission by default across every single thing on that drive. And so Windows, starting, I don't know, I'm going to say around Windows 98, very much discourages folks from saving things onto the top levels, certainly of your C drive, in order to keep people from having these kind of global permission settings. So I would suggest, no matter what we do, is make a new folder called Media on your I drive or G drive or whatever it was, and set that as your drive. But if you really want to store it at the top level of your I drive, you can now. It should work, but you'll probably need to reselect the path. All right. Let's see what else here. Greg says reading Batman's Grave now, all 12 issues, liking it. And yes, oh, and also Greg says here's something about DC going all anthology with their books is $7.99 price point. Has anyone else heard about this? I have not. I'd be really interested. If anyone else has heard anything like that, let me know in the chat. There's been a lot of rumors swirling around DC about going essentially bookish, like losing the floppies one way or another. I haven't heard about the all anthology. That would be an interesting take if that's true. I will say, on the other hand, on a happier note, if you guys remember me and my love for Eagle Moss graphic novels, I went and gave myself a late Christmas present just the last couple days. Eagle Moss, I guess in England they have a thing called Blue Monday, which is, other than being a great New Order song, it's a cause for some sort of sale or celebration, because Eagle Moss had a 30% off sale on their UK site, and I used that as an opportunity to check out the 50 or so graphic novels that I've been having in my cart over there for months, just waiting for such a sale. So I just got note that those have all been shipped to my UK forwarding address, and then those are going to be shipped to me. And so probably by a couple of days from now, I should have apparently 5 large boxes of graphic novels show up, with the next 40 or so novels in the DC graphic novel set, including the Batman. They do a separate set, not just of the DC graphic novels that we've been talking about on the show, but they have a separate ones for the Legend of the Batman. And Batman's Grave, I believe, is one of those, and I believe that's coming to me as well. So I'm looking forward to checking that out. I have a lot of reading ahead for me when I get back from different adventures. All right. So on to other things. Hey, we're actually doing kind of okay for time. We're going to wrap this one in an hour. I swear to God, Greg, it's going to happen. Just once, we're going to hit our dang hour time frame. I want to talk a little bit about a couple of tech things that have come up. And these are the things I want to talk about after we're not in like sale mode. I always hold off saying negative things about anything in the world while we're doing a sale, because you want people to feel happy and optimistic that they can accomplish great things and nothing bad can ever happen. But if anyone's ever used a computer in your life, everyone knows bad things happen when you use a computer. And one of those bad things, a number of them, is you can do things like, I lost my hard drive. My laptop got stolen by roaming invaders. We've had people who've lost them in floods. We've had people whose houses burned down. We've had ex-wives make off with laptops. Any number of things can happen, and if your data is stored in just one place, I'll put it this way: the old saying goes, unless you have 2 copies of anything on a computer, you have no copies, because one copy it's just, as they say in About a Boy, it's just not enough. You need backups. Anyway, for whatever reason, despite all the measures that ComicBase does to try to give people active backups of everything you do, I've had 2 different people come out of the woodwork in the last month who had tragedies of various sorts. One guy had, I want to say it was something crazy like ComicBase 8 or something like that, seemed like a 13 or 14-year-old version of ComicBase, and he hadn't had a backup in the last decade, and he couldn't find his data and whatever else, and he was having issues. I hope he got them worked out. Unfortunately, a lot of things have gone on in the 15 years since that version came out, so to make things easier to work with, but we didn't have quite as many safeguards back then to make sure that you couldn't if doing yourself in. I've had other people who studiously made sure they deleted all their copies of ComicBase, and then called up and were concerned, well, why is my data gone? I'm like, well, where's your data? And they said, well, I deleted it all. Well, your data's gone now, because your data lives on your machine. Now, that's it. We do by default, and I'll tell you what we do, and then I'll tell you what you need to do extra. Because, look, of all the things you ever do on a computer, it's your time is the one precious thing that you've got on your computer. The computer itself, once upon a time, when I first got into computers were the 3rd most expensive purchase that most people would make in their lives. It was your house, your car, and your computer, in that order. That was the order of just expenses. Computers these days can be a couple $100, so the computer, the hardware itself, isn't the big deal anymore for most folks, unless you really have some elaborate rigs. No, it's the data is what's really precious about your computer, and you've got to protect it. Now, ComicBase, we do this a couple ways. First of all, the second you exit a field in ComicBase, we've already saved your data. So, if you type a 1 in some field, you tab to the next field, and immediately all the power in your neighborhood goes out, there's every chance in the world that 1 you typed in that field has already been saved. So that's pretty good. Now, every time you exit the program, by default, we're going to also save a backup of your data. And let's go spend just a moment and talk about that. I'll flip over to the screen here. So everyone right at home, just do this right now, just to have the peace of mind. Go up under Setup, go to Preferences, and make for dang sure that automatically backup databases when you close the program has got a check mark next to it. If it doesn't, check it right this second. What this is it says every time I exit the program, just make a copy of what I did, right? And by default, it's going to make 5 different copies of your data, and they're all going to be they'll have names, which if you look at the name closely, it'll say backup, and then it'll have when you look at that, it'll actually be the time that the time and date that the backup was saved. Now, after you've made 5, it's going to, and you go to make a 6th one, it's going to delete the oldest one, and it'll cycle it. Look, if you want to make this be 50, if you got the disk space to do it, go for it. It doesn't matter to us. But if 5 seems like a pretty manageable reason. Now, why do we make 5 different backups? What's wrong with one backup? Well, what happens is something really weird happens in your database. Like, I don't know, your kids start playing with your computer, and he just decided, I'm going to do a mass change. I'm going to set all the quantities in the database to my favorite number, 8675309, whatever the thing is. And then you don't notice it right away because you're busy doing other things. And then you go to total up your comics one day and you realize, wait a minute, it says here I have about 73 trillion comic books. Well, you'd like to be able to go back to the version that didn't have that. But if you didn't notice it right away, maybe that was a couple days ago. Well, with this, you can say, all right, let me load up Wednesday's backup and we'll see what that one looks like. It gives you a little bit more grace period in case something just went strange to back up in time. No, so that's pretty good, right? It's not, again, you're starting to realize there's a limit to all this stuff. It doesn't go back forever, but it gives you more choices. Something else you can do is you start thinking like, well, what are all the different ways that my life can go wrong on me? So I got the idea that something inserted a worm on my computer that is corrupting databases. I got a kid that's messing with stuff. Whatever the thing is, that's one possibility. A very common possibility is just I somehow shut down my computer without I pulled the plug, I kicked the power strip, I lost power right as it was writing to disk, and somehow just clobbered the database. A good way to destroy anything is to lose power suddenly while it's writing to disk. It applies to your Xbox games, it applies to databases. So one backup would save you from that problem. The corruption issue, having multiple backups saves you from that problem. All right, let's take a different one. What if your whole hard drive goes wrong, right? So let's say, the problem is not that, my kid played with my whole thing or that one database thing is there. Let's just say the whole hard drive just utterly hard crashed, failed, right? At that point, it'd be a really good idea if your backup was on some other drive than your main drive. Well, one way you can do that is instead of using the default here, which is to save your backups to the same folder as your original database, if you've got a second drive, so let's say you've got a separate USB drive or a second hard drive, you can click this guy over here and say, don't save my backups to the original database drive, save them to a different place. And then go and choose a different drive on your computer and save the backups there. So for instance, I've got another drive over here. Anyway, but I could use one of my drives over here and save my ComicBase backups there, because that way if my C drive goes out for whatever reason, I've got another one. Okay, well that's pretty, now we're starting to get pretty good, right? But there's more ways that your life can go wrong, right? What happens if your whole computer gets stolen, right? So the jealous ex-wife scenario, which I love that someone was so jealous of their ex-wife was so jealous of the time the guy spent with his comic book collection, she decided, to heck with you, I'm stealing your whole computer. That was, well, it's a funny story to me because it didn't happen to me. But anyway, but if your whole computer's gone, doesn't matter whether it's stored on another drive. You need to have your data stored someplace which isn't your computer, right? So you could do this in a couple different ways. You could save it to a thumb drive, which you keep separately somewhere else. You could occasionally do a file save a copy, save it onto a thumb drive. If you do something like that, don't do the one thing that everyone does with thumb drives and forget to hit eject. So what everyone does with thumb drives is they do a file, they save it, they save a copy to the thumb drive and say, great, that's done, and then they just yank the thumb drive straight out of the machine. What they didn't know is that in a lot of cases, some of the data was kind of sitting there in your computer's memory waiting for an opportune time to write, and it hasn't actually written the last little bit to that drive yet. It's called a write cache. It's done for really good reasons to make everything very efficient on your computer. Unfortunately, if you're the kind of guy who's just like grabbing disks out of your machine, which is what you're doing when you pull out a thumb drive, it causes real problems. So what Microsoft has done is they provided a command called eject for USB drives, which tells it, hey, if you guys had anything planned to write to this drive and you haven't written it yet, now is your time. And then once it's flushed all those cached writes, at that point it says, yeah, look, we're good. Now it's safe to pull it out. That's the time to pull out a thumb drive. I've seen more corrupted thumb drives from people just yanking them in and out than I could ever recount. So if you do use a USB thumb drive, for God's sake, use the eject command. And the way you find the eject command, and let me see if I can point it out over here, is if I go over to my computer, pull that up, move it onto the right screen. All right, let's say, darn, I'm sorry guys, I didn't think this went through quite well enough, but let's say that my D drive was a USB drive. I would right click on it over here, and there would be an eject command down at the bottom. Just click that before you kick the drive out. Okay. Back to other things to worry about. All right. So, all right, you're a good guy. You've saved your data to a separate USB drive. That's pretty good. So even if the jealous ex-wife steals my computer, I still got that. What if my house burns down? What if the house floods? What if something like that? What if I can't find the darn USB drive? Because the darn things always get left in your pocket and get run through the wash, at least if you're me. It's a really good idea to have your data backed up someplace which isn't even in your house. And a really easy way to do that is just use Sidekick. It's built into ComicBase. You can just right-click down on Sidekick, and by default, it's going to want to save to cloud. It'll save it up to your own space up in our cloud once a week. All you got to do is just make sure that ComicBase is shut down once a week or so it gets a chance to do its job, and that your computer's left on. And and when you've got stuff like that, you just go under ComicBase.com, go to My Account and My Backups, and you'll see your data there. And we have had any number of people who that saved their bacon when their computer completely failed, and they had no other outside backups, and they were absolutely relieved to say, oh my God, I have a backup from like 3 weeks ago or last Wednesday, which was saved on the backup. In which case, the blood pressure level goes from just heart attack level down to phew, I can live. So that's a good thing. Now that's it. Make sure your backups are actually working. So if you've ever been getting errors while trying to save to the cloud, it says your firewall is blocking you or doing whatever else. If you get errors like that, don't ignore them, right? Figure out what the problem is and fix it. And if you need to use a different program to back your stuff up to a web service like a Dropbox or a OneDrive, do it. But get your computer someplace, get your precious data, the data that you spend so many hours putting into the program, get it saved someplace which isn't your computer, and which isn't in your house, which isn't on the same hard drive. And then make sure, just periodically, just test it. Just go back and say, hey, are the backups still working? Or did did my subscription to the backup service expire and I kind of forgot about it? Did I get a new firewall and it's been blocking things? I've been kind of blowing off the whole thing. I said, don't warn me about it again. Check this stuff out from time to time. Just make sure your systems are there. You don't need to think about it too much, but every 6 months, just like you check your smoke detector, check your backups. Make sure they're happening, and then that way we won't need to go into grief counseling mode and you call us and say, do you guys have a copy of my data? Because the answer is, unless you saved a copy of your data on our servers, we don't. Your data is your data. It lives on your machine, and it's not our business unless you say save it to us. So anyway, that's the word about backups. I didn't want to be grim about it, but I do want to spread the word out because I don't like taking that call. It doesn't make anyone happy, and I hate not being able to help people who are having trouble. So anyway, that's the kind of the deal. Alrighty, right. Hi, Greg. Greg says, I heard a rumor that people won't be doing this live stream anymore because it'll be too busy reading his Eagle Mouse graphic novels. Possibly. Let's see here. And Steve says the max number of backups you can enter is 10. You know what, Steve? Just for you, I'm going to up that number. It's funny because all these controls in Windows, if whether they're date control or anything else, have a certain built-in maximum that they go, and unless we have some reason to change it, a lot of times we'll let it fly. Honestly, I'll go ahead and move that up to 99 or 100. Maybe there's someone crazy enough to want 99 backups of their data. I'll just change it. So look for a build 1504 because that'll take like about a second to fix. Okay, and some other advice on backups here. Oral points out the same problem about the 10. So I will, yes. You know what? I've always wanted to do this in real time. Let me see if I can make this happen. Guys, we're going to watch some live stream magic just at work here. All right, so VAP for just a moment. I'm just going to pull up the ComicBase source code because I can. All right, let's go down to firm preferences. Number of backups, going down to the max value property. And by the way, if you ever, I was thinking back to Andy Hertzfield, who's one of the inventors of a thing called Smalltalk. And back when, all right, first guy, does anyone, just give an answer in the chat. Does anyone have a need for more than 100 backups? If anyone does, let me know, preferably in the next 20-30 seconds. Anyway, and I will hit refresh and we'll see if anyone comes up with anything. All right, if not, then I have changed this. It has built successfully, and I am going to push a new build live and on the air, and that is rolling right now. If you guys ever care about what this end of my life looks like, pushing a new build looks kind of like this. After you've compiled everything, you kick off a ginormous batch file, which, copies everything, rebuilds the installers, increments the version numbers, etc. And when this is all done, it'll push it down to all the different servers, digitally sign all the files, etc. This is writing the batch file that makes all this stuff is no small part of what it takes to actually make my life go, in any kind of normal way. And when this is all done, making all 4 different, I think it's 4, we might have 5 different versions of ComicBase now. Let's see, we got the free, the Express, the Pro, the Archive, and the 4K. So I guess there's now 5 different versions of ComicBase. So once it's made all 5 of those, it copies them off to a Dropbox, which then gets synced up with the staging servers. And in about 4 minutes, you should have a new version of ComicBase, version 1506, it looks like, which will have a maximum of 100 backups. So, what the hell? I've always wanted to do something like that live on the air, and we've just done it. So well done, guys. The point I was going to make about Smalltalk is when object-oriented programming first came out, I had to be completely convinced. Why is this a thing? I mean, what's wrong with a program that starts at the beginning, ends at the end? Why do you need to have little bits of code that are all wrapped around different objects which may or may not interact? And the answer, of course, is you could never build something like a windowed operating system without that kind of deal. I mean, you could, but it'd be hellish. But one of the demos they would use to try to convince programmers way back in the day that this was a wonderful idea for a new model of programming was they said, well, okay, I remember Andy Hertzfield giving this demo where he had a bunch of bouncing balls going around the screen. He said, okay, but what if I wanted the ball to be red? And he said, well, I've got a ball object. And he clicks on the ball object, pulls up the properties on the ball object, and says, all right, instead of it being black, it's now red. And then suddenly it's a red ball flying around the screen. It's like, okay, great. Well, who cares? Now it's red. Big deal. I mean, Anyway, what just happened just now live on air is we had a property of a thing on a form, which was the date, the value picker for, it's actually a thing called a numeric up-down control, which, someone had written all the code that makes that little thing with the arrows going up and down, and you could type in the number and so forth, and it has a property called its max value. And I changed the max value from 10 to 100, and it took about a second. Pushing all the stuff out, which, by the way, everything is now up to the Dropboxes, and probably in a matter of a minute or two, it will be synced out to all the servers. And anyway, that does happen live and live. This is how modern programming works. Okay, I have 7 minutes left. I am going to frickin' make this. Excellent. All right, so last bit of news I've got here. 100's fine for me. Excellent. Yes, by the way, Oro says comic-based info on the main page already says 1506, and that's true. One of the things that I have is I also have another program that it hits once it's figured out what the new version number is from general distribution. It then updates a database record, which all the other websites hit, which says what the main version is, because I got really, really tired of changing that number by hand. It got really, really old. Anything, honestly, my time is too precious. Anything that takes a lot of manual remembering, it's not going to get done well. And if I need it done well, then I better have a robot that does it for me. All right, last item of business for you is I don't know if there's going to be a live stream next week. Not because I'll be reading Eagle Mouse graphic novels, but because I'm taking off. I'm going to hit the beach. It's been a long damn time, guys. I haven't had a vacation in, God, at least a year. And unlike most of y'all, I work through most of the holidays. I get, we did a product launch right at Thanksgiving, for goodness sake. And so Thanksgiving I was eating turkey and diagnosing installer issues on Canadian systems, before I'd even had the turkey. So anyway, it's been a long time. And also, let's face it, with all this COVID flu, I've been climbing the walls. I need to hit some place where I'm not wearing a damn mask, and I can sit on a beach with a Corona in my hand and watch the waves roll in, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm in Nashville right now, which is a very wide but very thin state. I'm going to head straight south till I hit the Gulf of Mexico. It's about a 4 or 5 hour drive, depending on how many speed laws I break. And after that, I'm going to either head left or right. I'm not sure. I'm going to make it up as I go along. If I had left, I'll be going down the Florida, peninsula and check out some things down there. Who knows how far I go. And if I go right, I'll head into Texas and look at stuff down there. And honestly, in the back of my mind, I'm also thinking about maybe what are the real estate possibilities of things. Maybe opening up a second base of operations for things, or maybe picking up some rental property. Don't know. But like I said, need to get out, and so I'm going to get out. So there may or may not be a live stream next time. If there is, it'll probably be me with a video camera in my car, and it'll be really short because I won't be answering a ton of questions. But anyway, guys, wish me well. It should be an exciting time, and I'll see you again in at least 2 weeks, maybe a week from now, but I'll let you know. We'll post things to the forum. And the rest of the gang will be running things in my stead. It'll all be just fine. But you guys have a good one, and I'll see you all next time. Take care. Bye-bye.